I have a lot of suspicions about these data centers that have been popping up all over the place recently. We've been told that these things are being built to keep up with an increasing demand for AI, but we really haven't seen demand increasing in the consumer market. The more that I looked into this, the more that I found that these projects are tied to government contracts that call for military and surveillance integrations. In this video, I'm going to make the case that consumer AI is being used as a cover for a massive military project. The subscription revenue from every single consumer AI product combined can't pay for the infrastructure that's being built. And if you look hard enough, you'll see that the companies that are pouring all this money into this build out are telling us who the actual customers are. According to research compiled by industry analyst Ed Zitron, AI consumers are burning through about $10 worth of computing power for every dollar that they actually spend, which makes it seem like these companies are throwing away money. But the consumers aren't their only customer. Some of these data centers cost billions to construct. A consumer asking ChatGPT or Claude to summarize a document or write an email takes a very small amount of computation. Even with millions of users at the same time, it's not enough to require this massive deployment of data centers that we've been seeing. But on the other hand, a surveillance system that analyzes every single detail about the lives of over 300 million people would probably require something like this. These companies aren't hiding it either. They're very open about their government contracts. On March 31st of this year, Oracle published a press release titled, "Oracle Expands AI Infrastructure Options for U.S. Government Customers." The release announced the deployment of new high-end NVIDIA chips inside Oracle's government cloud regions, the segregated facilities that handle federal work. This is not unusual either. This is all of these corporations. In 2025, the Pentagon awarded contracts of up to $200 million each to OpenAI, Google, xAI, and Anthropic. On May 1st of this year, the Department of Defense announced new agreements with 7 major technology companies to deploy AI systems inside its highest classified networks. The list of companies includes OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, and NVIDIA. These projects make up something that they're calling the sovereign cloud. Sovereign cloud refers to data center infrastructure that is physically and legally segregated for government use, where the data never leaves a controlled environment that only people with security clearance can have access to. And that market consists entirely of government agencies. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said publicly last week that data centers are a national security priority and that every state has an obligation to allow them to be built. The Box Elder Data Center in Utah, the largest project like this in the world, is being rushed through the regulatory process by the Utah Military Installation Development Authority, the bureaucracy that exists to bring military facilities to the state. Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank investor and boating enthusiast who's funding the project, told CNN that the facility was a national defense project. The specific details of their plans are not clear, but many signs are pointing to surveillance. In July of last year, Trump signed an executive order called Accelerating Federal Permitting of Data Center Infrastructure. The order created a category called qualifying projects, which get fast-tracked through federal permitting. There are 4 ways to qualify, and one of them is to protect national security. If a project gets designated this way, they can skip environmental protections and other regulations. The administration is also offering taxpayer-funded loans, grants, and other tax incentives to fund these projects. So right there, the government is basically saying that they consider data centers to be national security infrastructure. For the past 2 decades, American intelligence agencies and police departments have been gathering our data through 2 main channels. The first is through the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows the government to collect data from foreign targets. But in practice, they end up getting a lot of data from Americans in what they call incidental collection. The second is the data broker market, where private companies harvest information from everything you do online and then sell that data on the open market. In March of this year, FBI Director Kash Patel admitted to Congress that the Bureau buys location data on American citizens directly from data brokers, sidestepping the warrant requirements that would otherwise apply if they tried to collect it themselves. He's also recently bragged about how the FBI has fully adopted AI under his watch. So they have had all this data for a very long time, but what they have had a problem doing is sifting through it and making connections. That is until the development of a piece of software called Foundry, made by Palantir. Foundry takes data from many different sources and organizes it in a way that makes it very easy to navigate and put things together. To process the amount of data that Foundry is being asked to integrate and run the analysis on that data, they are going to need an insane amount of computing power, which would be a very realistic explanation for the forced rollout of all these data centers. We know that these projects are actually coming, and we know that this is the level of infrastructure that would actually be required to run it. And we know that this level of infrastructure is not needed for consumer technology. So it's pretty obvious that this is what all this will be used for. Another angle to all this is that our computing infrastructure does not need to be built this way. All of these centralized servers that are harmful to the natural environment and the nearby residents and require this massive amount of power and water, it's not even necessary to do things this way. But of course, having these centralized servers allows billionaires like Kevin O'Leary to cash in and make a ton of money. And these centralized servers are also much more fitting for military and surveillance work instead of consumer level computing. A great example of an alternative is distributed AI computing. The idea is to make it possible for anyone to rent out computing power from their idle home computers or laptops in exchange for a small fee. Projects like this already exist, and they are often cheaper than the data centers with similar performance. This way of doing things would not suck up water out of local reservoirs or double the state's energy use. The government would never allow this kind of infrastructure for the surveillance grid, though, because it would be distributed through a bunch of different computers, not on computers that they control. And I really think that's why they continue to build out these massive data centers, in addition to the fact that billionaires can make a lot of money. The good news is that people are finally starting to push back against these data centers. And in some recent cases, local residents were even able to prevent these data centers from being built in their communities. In Warrenton, Virginia, residents voted out every member of the town council who supported an Amazon data center project. The new council was made up entirely of project opponents, and they killed the deal. In a Charlotte suburb called Matthews, a $6.2 billion plan was withdrawn after the mayor said that his office received public comments at a ratio of 999 to 1 against the project. In Wisconsin, a small city of less than 17,000 people stopped a hyperscale data center through community organizing. According to data tracked by Heatmap News, more than $85 billion worth of data center projects have been canceled in the last 3 years because of community opposition. At least 14 states have passed temporary moratoriums on data center construction. Let me know in the comments what you think these data centers are actually for, or if you've seen anything like this popping up in your area. Don't forget to check out my other videos. And if you have the ability and want to contribute, take a look at my Patreon, where you can get a subscription to my books and other cool stuff. I have some other videos to watch right here. So if you haven't seen them, go and binge on them. I'll see you next time.